Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the Insider's Guides, where I interview pilots about the aircraft that they fly. And Greg Thomas is a former client who flies a Mustang and moved into that from a Cirrus. So I'm super interested in hearing his perspective on moving from a Cirrus to a Mustang and having you get all the data about the Mustang that Greg has. Greg comes to us from Fort Worth, where he is the president and CEO of Delta Oil and Gas. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, tell me a little bit about your migration from the Cirrus to the Mustang and why you picked the Mustang.
Well, the main reason I decided to go into a jet, my son is in school on the East Coast, and to get out there in the Cirrus takes all day long. So I started looking around and I started working with you guys and looking for a good single pilot jet, and the Mustang really kind of fit the bill for what I was looking for. So now I'm able to get to the East Coast in 2.5 hours rather than taking all day.
Right. One of the things that was really important to you was sticking with an avionics system that you were familiar with, right?
Right. The
Right.
G1000.
That's the Garmin 1000 and the Mustang. So tell me how that performed for you and what your transition was like moving from the Cirrus to the Mustang with that.
Well, for the avionics perspective, it was really a no-brainer. I mean, it was like sitting in the exact same aircraft. Everything works exactly the same. If you spend any time with the G1000, it's very intuitive, and it works great in both planes, and it works the same in both planes. So there really wasn't a big learning curve there.
But the power, how did that affect you?
The power is a lot different. That's a whole different. I use it also to commute back to my office, which is about 90 miles away, and in the Cirrus would take me about 38 minutes, and in the Mustang takes about 16 minutes.
Tell me a little bit more about the operations of the aircraft. What's your fuel burn like? What's your speed, your cruising out speed, and your altitude in the aircraft?
Okay, well, a lot of it depends on the mission. If I'm going, like say on a normal weekday mission, when I'm going out to my office, I'll get up to like 12,000 feet, and you'd be doing about 249 knots indicated, depending on what the winds are. At that point, you're burning about 800 pounds an hour is what you're burning. If I'm flying a longer trip, say to go up to the East Coast to my kids or to Midland for a meeting, you're getting up to the altitudes, the 40, 41s. If you're low enough on fuel, you're burning about 600 pounds an hour. So it's a lot cheaper, obviously, the higher you fly and the longer you go.
Right. What's the longest trip you've taken it on? What's the range?
I went out to out near Dulles. It was over Christmas. We flew out there, and it was we made it nonstop out there on the way back. Of course, we had to make a fuel stop, but that's probably the longest single leg. It was about a little over 1,000 miles.
Wonderful. You talked a little bit about the Garmin being easy, but can you tell me a little bit more about the setup in the cockpit? I hear there are a couple of challenges with that, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, where you can set things and where you can't, and just kind of the ergonomics from a pilot perspective in the cockpit.
Well, the Cirrus is actually geared up better, I think, for an ergonomic perspective, because I think the plane was built around the pilot a little bit better. A lot of it is learning, all right, where your keypad's in different place, your knobs are in a little different place, so you end up reaching out of muscle memory for different spots. So it takes a little while to get used to where everything's located. But once you spend a couple hours in the airplane, it's really pretty simple.
Tell me about the training protocol that you had to go through for this aircraft. What was the cost of that, and how difficult was it?
You have to get a type rating, which is not as easy as you think it's going to be, because you think, it's an airplane. So I went to SimCom in Scottsdale. They did a fantastic job. Really enjoyed those folks out there. My cost ended up getting a discounted cost. I paid around $10,000 for the type rating. I was there for a little over 2 weeks, and you spend gosh, how many hours? I don't remember how many hours you spend in ground school, and then you spend quite a few hours in the sim, and then you do a FAA check ride at the end. It's pretty intensive. You're going to spend, I ended up going out by myself. My wife joined me for a few days, but you would get up in the morning, go work out, make breakfast, go to class from 8 to 5, go back to to the apartment I rented, have a scotch, make dinner, and study until about 11, and then do it all over again for 2 weeks. So it's very intensive. You have to really learn a lot about the systems. It's a lot more complex than a single engine piston, obviously. And you learn about what can go wrong. Mainly is what you're studying is the emergency procedures. You don't really learn to fly the airplane at SimCom. You learn how to deal with all the emergency procedures. Once that was done, I had a type rating that required another pilot to be with me for 25 hours. So I hired a guy who was a really phenomenal pilot out of Scottsdale, and we flew for 25 hours all across the country. And we'd wake up in the morning and say, all right, which way do you want to go today? And we would kind of head that direction. So we got to see a lot of the country in the airplane and do a lot of really cool things and really learn how to fly the thing.
Great. What do you feel like is the biggest strength of the Mustang?
I think the power is the biggest strength of the Mustang. It's, you can get in and out of short runways. You can go places you really can't go with a Cirrus. And the biggest thing is you can get above the weather. I was flying to Ely, Minnesota last fall, and there were thunderstorms all across the country. And I was looking at them, and had it been the Cirrus, we would have been not going. But as the Mustang, we're looking down, and well, there's the weather down there high, and you're above it all. So it really makes it a lot easier.
And then what's the biggest weakness of the Mustang, do you think? Where are its shortfalls?
I think useful load is the biggest weakness. It's a 6-passenger airplane, two in the cockpit and 4 in the back. But you load that up with 6 people and luggage, you're not going very far. So you've really got to really manage your weight and balance carefully. That's the biggest concern I have is like, taking the kids. If it's my wife and I going somewhere, it's no big deal. But if throw the kids in there with bags, all right, we're going to make a few stops along the way to pick up some fuel.
And so speaking of having full passengers in the back, how is the passenger comfort in the Mustang? If you have 4 people in the back, what's that experience like for them?
It hasn't been too bad. And that was one of the things that when we were purchasing the airplane, I sat in the back of the 2 facing seats with your son, Jake. Jake is not a small boy. Jake,
no, he's 6'6".
6'6". So Jake and I sat facing each other, and we had plenty of legroom. So that was one of the things I wanted to see before I bought it was, could 2 big guys sit in there? Because I'm 6 feet, Jake's 6'6", and we had plenty of legroom. So I wanted to make sure that would work. Obviously, if you only have 2 people in the back and they can prop their feet up on the seats in front of them, it's much more comfortable. But if you're taking, a full load, it is a comfortable airplane.
They just all better not be overeaters.
Right. That's the key.
Well, tell me about the luggage capacity.
All right, you've got 320 pounds of capacity in the nose and 300 in the back. I've never come close to filling that up with the weight. I mean, I fill it up with space with Christmas presents and things like that, but that's a lot of weight to really put in there. And if you consider, one of the things you like to watch out is the weight and balance when you're doing it, because even though you can put 320 pounds in the nose, you put 300, you've got to balance it out or you're going to be out of center of gravity. So I use CP Calc, which is a program that Textron provides, and you can kind of I need to move 50 pounds to the back or whatever you're going to do. But it works pretty well. You just have to be careful not to overweight one area versus another.
That makes sense. Tell me about the reliability of the aircraft. You've been flying it roughly 6 months, 8 months maybe. How reliable has it been for you?
It's been very reliable. We really had no issues with it at all. I've been on a really intensive maintenance scheduling program. We kind of got ahead of all of our dock inspections and really did a bunch of work at the beginning. I've got a group out of Fort Worth that manages the airplane for me, and they go out once every 2 weeks and basically go over the airplane from top to bottom and see if there's anything that's wrong with it. And at that point, we fix it. My goal was with working with these guys to say, look, I want to have this airplane ready to go all the time. and I don't want to ever get out there and have it like, oh, I've got a problem. So they're doing a really good job and taking good care of me.
Wonderful. And tell me about the maintenance. You had a bunch done, but tell me about overall your impression of the maintenance expenditures and the downtime that you have with the Mustang, Craig.
We really haven't had a whole lot of downtime. Initially, when we first got it, there were some things that I wanted to fix. We did, some interior work, some paint work, and there were some squawks that weren't considered airworthy, and I wanted them all fixed. So we probably spent about, if you consider the paint, interior, and maintenance, probably about 6 weeks getting that worked out, which I was also in training at the same time, so that worked out pretty well. And then we did our dock inspections, and that took about 3 weeks. Other than that, the airplane really has not been out of service.
That's fantastic. Any parting thoughts about the aircraft, things that you would say, pros or cons on the Citation Mustang?
It's a great aircraft. And if you're transitioning from, a piston or a twin engine piston or a single engine piston, I think the Mustang is a great airplane. It's really easy to fly. I would say it's actually easier to fly than a Cirrus, which is, people are going to go, you're crazy, but no, it really is. It's very reliable. I think it's a very safe airplane. I've seen, during the training what it can do with one engine, and you really don't have to worry about many things. It's just it's a very reliable platform. It's solid, and you can really do a lot of cool things with it.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for being on with me today. I appreciate all the insight and the information about the Mustang and the Phenom, and wish you and your family all the best.
All right. Thank you so much, Renee. It's great talking to you.